Okay, let's take a moment and cultivate our motivation and bring our mind back to feeling happy that we have this opportunity and really rejoicing at the opportunity we have, and feeling enthusiastic about the possibility of generating compassion for ourselves and others, and with an awareness of the benefits of compassion. Excuse me. Then let's try and cultivate that mind, open our heart, extend it towards all limitless sentient beings with kindness and with a wish that they be free from all dukkha. And thus cultivating the bodhicitta motivation so that we can bring that about. So for the people who are listening in online, we are in the middle of a retreat and have 30-something people here in the room. And we've been going through the 108 verses of compassion, a text by Geshe Losang Tayang, who's the same author as the Path and Grounds text we've been going through. And since in the retreat we don't we're finishing tomorrow and there's still a bit more to go in the text, this session is going to be on the text on compassion, not on the Path and Grounds. Okay, but that doesn't mean you can hang up. Because a little bit of hearing about compassion would be good for you. Okay. So, in the text, we were on verse 84. Okay? Yes?
Started 85. I'm sorry.
Well, on mine, it's 84.
Yeah, we started at 84. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Verse 84. Let's get on the same page first. Okay, so this verse says, no matter how much of poison of sensual delights the host of peacocks, the children of the conquerors, those heroes, may eat, it only serves to enhance the beauty of the peacock's feathers, their qualities, and that beauty is your splendor. Okay, so what this is referring to is in ancient Indian culture, it's said that a peacock is able to digest poison, and instead of being killed by it, it increases the luster of their feathers and makes them even more beautiful. Whereas if a crow ate the same poison, it would die. Okay? So here in this analogy, the poison is sense pleasure. Yeah, the idea not being that sense pleasure itself is poisonous, but we so easily get attached to it, and that attachment is like poison. Okay, but a bodhisattva, yeah, especially an Arya bodhisattva, is so firm on the path and so committed to their goal and has such a good understanding of the nature of reality that they can be amidst a lot of sense pleasure, and their mind doesn't get out of whack and affected in an adverse way, the way our mind does. Okay, so that's why at the beginning of the practice we often limit our contact with sense pleasures, with the media and things like that, because our mind is so totally uncontrolled. Yeah, that's one of the purposes behind monastic precepts, is we limit our contact with that because the mind just gets so full of attachment. Okay, but to a high bodhisattva, they can enjoy those sense pleasures, and it only increases their compassion. Okay, whereas with us, it increases our ignorance, anger, and attachment. Okay, so it's making showing a difference between us and the qualities that we will have when we become an Arya Bodhisattva. Okay, then you can enjoy all the sense pleasure you want, but you're not going to be enjoying it in the same way you are now. It's going to be a totally different way of relating to sense pleasure, because instead of the mind being stuck on it with attachment, and full of self-centeredness, this is mine, I don't want to share it with you, the mind just enjoys, and when it's finished, it's over. But the Bodhisattva's life is really committed to compassion. Okay, so that's 84. Then 85. Okay, other precious jewels can only fulfill their own individual purpose, but the king of jewels that has the power to fulfill one's wishes can accomplish all of one's needs and desires effortlessly. Likewise, the 6 perfections, verse 86, such as generosity, bring about their own individual results, such as wealth, but great compassion brings about the 2 goals and every excellence. Okay, so here it's comparing compassion to a wish-fulfilling jewel. So other jewels, can fulfill only their own purpose. A ruby's nice for this, and a diamond's nice for that, and a sapphire for this, but that's kind of it. Whereas a wish-fulfilling jewel, what's referred to here as the king of jewels, has the power to fulfill all wishes. So if you have the wish-fulfilling jewel, you don't need all these individual ones, because that one is going to bring you everything. Okay? So in the same way, these 6 far-reaching practices, generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stability, and wisdom, these all bring about their own individual results. So generosity brings about wealth. Ethical conduct, this is karmically, so being generous brings wealth to you. Holding ethical conduct enables you to have a fortunate rebirth. Practicing fortitude and patience brings about having an attractive body. Because you can see when we don't have fortitude and patience and we're angry and upset, our body is very unpleasant to look at. But when we practice those, the body becomes pleasant to look at. Practicing joyous effort creates the cause to accomplish the different things that we want to accomplish. So we find, some people in their life, they can't finish anything. You start a lot of things, but you run out of steam or get distracted in the middle. Whereas if we practice joyous effort, then not only in this life, but in future lives, we'll have the karma to be able to accomplish our aims and purposes. Sounds nice, huh? Okay. Then meditative stability creates the cause to be a peaceful person. Very clearly, if we develop some concentration and suppress the very gross afflictions temporarily, we become very peaceful this life, and it creates the cause in future lives, to not have anxiety and nervousness and worry and things like that, but to be quite peaceful and relaxed. And then wisdom, if we practice it in this life, creates the cause in future lives to be very sharp and intelligent and able to discern things and discriminate things, very astutely. Okay, so each of the far-reaching practices brings its own result, so they're like the individual jewels, but the wish-fulfilling jewel brings all the results, and compassion is like that, because if we have compassion, then that leads us to generate bodhicitta, and bodhicitta leads us to practice all 6 of the far-reaching practices and to get all the results of all 6. Okay? So compassion, in that way is seen as much more valuable than, let's say, an individual practice such as ethical conduct or generosity, because compassion can bring so many wide results. Okay, there's a verse in Shantideva's text that talks about bodhicitta being a jewel. So it's in the 1st chapter, verse 25. So Shantideva says, "How does this unprecedented and distinguished jewel, whose desire for the benefit of others does not arise in others even for their own self-interest, come into existence? How can one measure the merit of the jewel of the mind, which is the seed of the world's joy and is the remedy for the world's suffering?" Okay, so here it's bodhicitta that's being compared to a jewel. Okay, so it's an unprecedented and distinguished jewel whose desire for the benefit of others does not arise even in people, even for their own self-interest. Okay, so if we were really interested in our own welfare, as His Holiness says, if you really want to take care of yourself, the best way to do that is to take care of others. So it's the thing that Shantideva is saying here is, if we want to be really smart for ourselves, then we generate bodhicitta, which, creates such good karma by taking care of others. Yeah. But people, even for their own benefit, which they cherish much more than others' benefit, they won't even generate bodhicitta. Okay? You see what he's saying? So, because common people don't see the benefit in cherishing others and don't see the benefit of compassion and bodhicitta, whereas, these kinds of minds are really so incredibly valuable. So that's why they're compared to a jewel, and especially a wish-fulfilling jewel, because a wish-fulfilling jewel brings all the goodness, not just partial goodness. Okay? And that actually relates back to some of the early verses in this text when our author was referring to Chandrakirti's homage to the supplement, because there it talks about how all the goodness he pays homage to great compassion because all goodness comes from great compassion. Yeah, because bodhisattvas are born from compassion, and Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas, and through the Buddhas having compassion, they teach the path to the hearers and the solitary realizers, so they also benefit from compassion, and we ordinary beings especially benefit from the Buddha's compassion because the Buddha teaches us what to practice on the path and what to abandon on the path, which is the primary first thing we need to learn, is about karma. What do you practice? What do you abandon? Yeah, so it starts out on a very elementary level with our daily life actions, but gradually it expands more and more in terms of what to practice and what to abandon on the higher paths as well. Okay? Mm-hmm. Hence, if one has the supreme jewel of compassion in the palm of one's hand, all of the Buddha's qualities will come into one's grasp without being sought. Isn't that nice? So, if you have this wish-fulfilling jewel in your hand, everything's going to come without having a lot of problems. So, in the same way, if we have this supreme jewel of great compassion, in our mind, then all of the Buddha's qualities are going to come. We're going to be able to actualize the entire path. Okay? So he's really stressing how important great compassion is here for attaining enlightenment. How crucial it is. And how crucial it is for the happiness of all beings, for the existence of this world. I mean, just think if politicians had compassion. Yeah? They would be acting so much differently than they are now. And they'd really be working for the benefit of the country and the benefit of the planet, instead of, dividing us all up into, this is mine and it's not yours, and this is yours, and it's, really having compassion for all the beings. It would make a huge difference, wouldn't it? Okay, next verse. We are speeding here. Okay. So verse 88. So verse 88 and 89 talk about the role of compassion in the lives of Buddhas in general. So 88 says, what does it mean to say that someone is the fully perfected Buddha? How can it have any meaning to say that it is someone who demonstrates incongruous works of magic from some abode wreathed in rainbow light? Okay, so what does it mean to say somebody's a fully perfected Buddha? It doesn't mean to say that they perform all sorts of deeds of magic while living in an abode, wreathed with rainbow light. Okay, but that's not the definition of a fully enlightened Buddha. Okay, instead, a Buddha is defined as one who always sees the world according to your predilections, great compassion, and protects it from suffering. So a Buddha isn't interested in works of magic and putting on a great show, but a Buddha is one who always sees the world through the eyes of great compassion. Okay? And not only sees the world through those eyes, but wants to protect the world, meaning all living beings, from all of their dukkha and free them from it. Okay, so different, contrasting somebody who's interested in magical powers with a fully enlightened Buddha. They're two completely different things. Yeah, and so we shouldn't get fooled by great displays of dazzling this and that, but really focus in on compassion. Oh, one time when I was living in Hong Kong many years ago, I was invited to give a talk at an international school. And there were little kids in it. It was an elementary school. So I talked to this assembly. And then, one little kid raises their hand. These were in the days when Uri Geller was really popular. Remember him? He used to be able to bend spoons, at a far distance. So this little boy said, "Can you bend spoons without touching them?" He was like really hoping I would say yes. Yeah, and then a little girl said, "Can you talk to God?" They had such cute questions, And, and then I tried to explain to them that from, what my viewpoint, even if I could bend spoons, that wouldn't make the world any better of a better place. It would only make people mad who needed to use the spoons. Yeah. And so I tried to explain to the kid that being kind is, much better than having this power of bending spoons or talking to God or something like that. And one time when I was living in Seattle, I was invited to a high school, and I gave a talk. And then one student, afterwards, when everybody went away, he came up and he said, "Do you believe in the devil?" And I said, "If you mean somebody outside of us who harms us, no. But I think the biggest devil is our own selfish mind. Yeah? I always wonder what happened to that kid. Yeah? Yeah, you could see, you know, how he was brought up. Okay. So a Buddha is one who always sees the world according to the predilections of great compassion and wishes to protect it. Quite beautiful. Yeah. And then verse 90. Okay, here verse 90 and 91 are talking about Shakyamuni Buddha's life. So verse 90 says, the superior teacher, the compassionate one, gave up the last fifth of his life as the cause for the perdurance of the teachings, the long lasting of the teachings, and his passing into peace is an expression of the extent of the mercy he showed to us. Hence your kindness, great compassion, is beyond the scope of verbal description. So it's referring something that the Buddha gave up the last fifth of his life in order for his teachings to endure long. I am not familiar with this.
His merit, so that last part of his life, he dedicated that merit to sentient beings so that they would...
No, the Buddha dedicated all his merit to sentient beings.
He was going to live to 100, but he decided not to let that merit. I don't know.
Oh, maybe it was the thing that the merit would have taken for the Buddha to live until 100 could have been, he chose to employ that merit so that his teachings would last a very long time. Something like that. Okay? Yeah. And so his passing into peace, the Buddha's parinirvana, when he left his body, is an expression of the extent of his mercy, you know, that he was willing to give up that last portion of his life so the merit could be used for the lastingness of his long life of his teachings. Okay? And so that kind of great compassion is beyond the scope of verbal description. Because, you know, would we give up a fifth of our life for the teachings to endure long?
If you were omniscient and Buddha, you would.
Yeah, but I'm talking about us. Yeah, so then you see that somebody who would do that, how incredibly compassionate they are. Okay, because we cherish, you know, every sentient being cherishes their life more than any other thing. It's the last thing we want to give up. Okay. Then verse 92, the protector Avalokiteshvara, Chenrezig, even blessed his own name to eliminate the fear of those who hear it. This too is the magic of boundless great compassion. Okay, so this is referring again to another verse in Shantideva's text. Let me find it here. Okay, it's in chapter 8, verse 118. Therefore the protector Avalokita empowered his own name to remove even one's fear arising from timidity in front of an audience. Okay, or another translation is, hence, out of great compassion, Lord Avalokita blessed his own name to dispel even the anxiety of being in a crowd. Okay, so you may say that seems rather strange, blessing your name so that people don't get nervous when they have to speak in front of a group. Okay, but I remember reading somewhere that somebody did some kind of study and they asked people what they were most afraid of, and more people were afraid of speaking in front of a group than they were afraid of dying. which I found very interesting. Yeah, kind of. But anyway, you know, everybody's different. Oh no, now I'm terrified. I better say Chenrezig, Chenrezig, Chenrezig. He blessed his name. You know, but they have this thing that, you know, a lot of the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas bless their own names in the sense of saying, when a sentient being remembers me or calls out my name, then I will, you know, with compassion be able to benefit that person. So, you know, when we do the 35 Buddhas, when we recite their names, they've blessed their names so that they become very potent for purifying different kinds of negative karma. So you can read about the specific negative karmas that different Buddhas have, you know, made the vow to help sentient beings eliminate. So it's similar here, that Chenrezig blessed his name so that beings will not be afraid of being in a crowd or speaking to a crowd. You know, the last reference that we had to Chenrezig in the previous page, you know, how a Buddha is defined as one who always sees the world according to your predilections, great compassion, and protects it from suffering. So the name Chenrezig, yeah, literally translated, Alex did it once, Alex Burson, and it came out something like, seeing the world not like a rag. Okay? So a rag is something you toss away that's worthless, but Chenrezig does not see the world, in other words, sentient beings, as like a rag, as something useless and to be tossed out, but as something precious. In China, Chenrezig is said to hear the cries of the world. You know, the Tibetans associate it with seeing the world, the Chinese with hearing the cries of the world. And so she responds and comes to the aid of sentient beings. Okay.
So if you're speaking before a large group, you should invoke the name of Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvara if you're nervous.
Yeah.
Right before you go on.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Because if you think about it, if you're nervous about speaking and you think of Chenrezig, if you think properly about Chenrezig, you're thinking about great compassion, which means that the people in your audience, you're generating great compassion for them. If you Right, and if you have great compassion for them, then what you have to say is going to flow from great compassion, and it's going to come out in a very good way because your motivation is a compassionate one. Yeah? Whereas we can see, you know, whenever we're angry, when we try and speak when we're angry, it doesn't come out well at all, does it? You know, everything is jumbled up. We say all sorts of things we don't mean. We destroy relationships, yeah? But when we think of compassion and have compassion for the person we're speaking to, then the words flow, you know, in a very good way. Yeah? Okay. 92. So verse 92 to 97 is the role of great compassions in the lives of some of the great practitioners. Okay, so 92, we just did it about Avalokiteshvara, you know, the role of compassion and blessing his name. Then verse 93, although the Venerable Asanga tried to obtain a vision of the protector Maitreya in a forest for a period of 12 years, still nothing happened. But on one occasion, he encountered a dog in distress. In that instant, a powerful compassion overwhelmed him, and he had a vision of Maitreya. Therefore, those who concentrate on you as their single deity will effortlessly behold the face of 100 deities. Okay, so this is the story of Asanga. So I'm going to tell you the story of Asanga because I really like it. It's one of my favorite ones. So, even if you've heard it before, you just have to listen again. Okay, So a little bit of background on Asanga. Okay, he was born in Purusapura in India, and in the capital of Gandhar, which is Afghanistan, you know. There was a Brahmin woman who was herself considered an adept in the teachings of Buddhism and who taught him the 18 sciences, which he mastered very easily. And then he became a monk, and he applied himself very diligently, memorizing 100,000 verses of Dharma each year and correctly understanding their meaning. He's a little bit bright here. Okay? But then he wanted to do retreat, so he left the monastery and he went in, he found a cave in a mountain and did retreat on Maitreya, the Buddha of love. Our little kitty Maitri, her name is Maitreya, you know? So he meditated and, you know, tried so hard. He wanted to have a vision of Maitreya, and he tried this and that, and, you know, pushed and relaxed and everything. He had no vision of Maitreya. Nothing happened. And after 3 years, he was fed up, and he just was discouraged, and he said, I'm going down to town. So he left his cave. As he was leaving his cave, he noticed, there's two ways they describe it. Some stories say that it was a rock that was, an eagle or some kind of bird had their nest beside the rock, so every time the bird flew out, its feather touched the rock and wore away part of the rock. Okay? How long is it going to take to wear away that rock by the feather touching it? Another way the story is told is he left the cave and he started going down the mountain, and he saw a man holding a feather, and he was stroking this rock, and Asanga said, what are you doing? And the man said, this stone, it was a huge boulder, is blocking the sunlight from coming into my house, and I'm trying to get rid of it by rubbing it with a feather. Okay, so Asanga said, this person has an awful lot of perseverance for a very worldly aim. Why do I have no perseverance for a very noble Dharma aim? And so he went back up into the mountains in retreat. Okay. He meditated for another 3 years, so much wanting to have a vision of Maitreya. No vision of Maitreya. You know, after these 3 years, he had forgotten about the man with the feather. He was fed up again. He said, I'm discouraged. I just can't do this. I'm going down to town. So he left his cave, and as he was going down, he saw another rock that had, there were like little drops of water falling on it once in a while, and it was gradually getting worn out by these little drops of water falling on it. Okay? And he said, you know, it takes an awful lot of drops of water, but enough drops of water, slowly, slowly, you know, this rock is getting worn away. So he turned back and went up the mountain again into retreat. Okay? You know, he kept seeing these things that, you know, he couldn't remain discouraged. So he meditated another 3 years, so he's at 9 years by now. No sign of Maitreya, no vision of Maitreya. So he's saying, my meditation is useless, this isn't working, it doesn't get me anywhere, I can't do it, it's too hard. All of our usual discouragement kind of talk. And he left his cave again, and he starts down the mountain. And this time he encounters an old man who's holding a huge piece of iron and rubbing it with a soft cloth. And he asked the man, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "I'm making a needle." Okay? So Asanga saying, it requires a lot of patience to make a needle this way. It requires a lot of joyous effort. You know, this old man is not, giving up making his needle by rubbing the big iron bar with a piece of cotton. So my Asanga goes back up the mountain and into retreat again, okay, and meditates another 3 years. So he's at 12 years now. No sign of Maitreya. He's done. You know, it's like finished. I don't care the bird's feather, the trickling water, the cotton, forget it. So he starts going down to town. So he gets down to town, and what does he see but this old dog whose body is just the dog was injured, and there were maggots in the dog's flesh crawling around. I mean, disgusting beyond belief. And he looked at this dog and he thought, "Oh my goodness, the dog is suffering so much. I've got to get the maggots out of it." But he knew that if he would pull the maggots out with his finger, he would squish them and then the maggots would die. And he didn't want that to happen. He wanted the maggots to live. So he cut off a piece of his thigh, okay, cut off a chunk of flesh from his thigh, and then he closed his eyes because he was going to pull the maggots out of the dog's rotting flesh with his tongue, and then place the maggots into the piece of his own flesh that he had cut off. So he stuck out his tongue, and he's going for to pull out the maggots, and he can't feel any maggots. And he opens his eyes, and there's Maitreya. This story always makes me cry. I mean, there's Maitreya, and Asanga is just going, I meditated so long trying to get a vision of you, and why are you coming now? And Maitreya said, because you generated compassion. It's because of the power of your compassion. It purified all of your obstacles, all of your obscurations that kept you from seeing me. And Maitreya went on to explain to Asanga, I was there the whole time you were meditating, but you had so much mental obscuration that you couldn't see me. And then Maitreya shows Asanga his robe and says, I can prove to you that I was there in the cave because you spit and it landed on my robe. And there was the dried spittle on Maitreya's robe. Yeah. So, this is the power of great compassion. How much it purified Asanga's mind so that he could see Maitreya. Whereas all of his other endeavors that lacked great compassion, although he was doing great Dharma practice, they didn't create the cause. They weren't strong enough purification to clear away the obscurations to him seeing Maitreya. Okay? And so Asanga was so happy, and he wanted to show all the people in the village that Maitreya was there. So he put Maitreya on his shoulders, and he went walking around the village saying to everybody, look at Maitreya, look at Maitreya. And of course the people in the village have so many karmic obscurations, they can't see Maitreya, and they think Asanga is nuts. What's this guy doing saying there's Maitreya? There was one old woman who had fewer obscurations than other people, and she at least saw a dog. but nobody else could see anything because their minds were so obscured. And then, then Maitreya said to Asanga, okay, what do you want to do now? And Asanga says, I want to study with you. So Maitreya said, hold on to my robe, which Maitreya did. And then Maitreya took him up to Tushita, one of the god realms, one of the Pure Lands, where Maitreya lives, before he descends to the earth, being the fifth of the 1,000 Buddhas. He's into the Tushita Pure Land. And he taught Maitreya these 5 great texts, which are, he taught Asanga these 5 great texts, okay? He was in this Pure Land for one morning of the Pure Land time, which was 50 years our time. Okay, so he was kind of like Rip Van Winkle, when he came back, though, 50 years had gone by, but he was only gone a morning. And he brought these very, very precious texts back to the earth. And to this day, these texts are studied very widely in all the Mahayana traditions. Okay, so you have Sutra Alamkara, okay, the ornament of sutras, and Abhisamaya Alankara, the ornament of clear realizations. You have Uttanamche, which is distinguishing the extremes from the middle, and Gyu Lama, which is Ratna Gotra, which is about the sublime continuum, which is a lot about Buddha nature. It's quite a beautiful text. And what's the 5th one? Let me look. I should know this. What's the 5th one? Abhisamaya, Sutra Alamkara. Oh, the Dharmadhatu Vibhanga. Okay. And then Asanga himself wrote the Compendium of Knowledge, which is an Abhidharma text, which we rely on a lot. Okay, and the Compendium of the Mahayana as well, and then also the treatise on the stages of the yogic practice, the Yogacharya Bhuma Shastra. Quite a well-known text. Okay, so Asanga, when we did the soak this afternoon, and I said we're visualizing what's on this tanka. So as you look at the tanka, on the Buddha's right is called, or our left as we look at the tanka, that's the lineage of the vast. So those are the teachings of describing principally bodhicitta and so forth, although there's a lot of wisdom teachings in those. But that lineage starts from Maitreya and goes to Asanga, and then goes down in India and into Tibet and so on, into the present day. But, so it's a very, very important lineage. And in Chinese Buddhism, they study Maitreya's texts a lot too. So, quite important. So that's the story of Asanga. Yeah, isn't that a beautiful story? Yeah. So, there's many things to learn from that story. And you just think of what Asanga went through. And, we can certainly understand his discouragement. Yeah, he wants some results. But what was it that gave him the results? Was when he wasn't looking for the results, but when he was being compassionate. When he had completely given up this mind of grasping for results and just had a compassionate heart. That's what did it. Okay, so it's quite a good example for us, this story of Maitreya. Okay, then verse 95 talks about the incomparable Lord Atisha. So Atisha lived in the 11th century, and he helped to bring Buddhism from India to Tibet. He was the abbot of Nalanda Monastery, and some Tibetans came and made offerings to him and begged him, please to come to Tibet. And his coming to Tibet was the beginning of the second dissemination of Buddha Dharma in Tibet. The first dissemination had happened in the 7th century, but then in the 9th century, there had been, or 8th century, there was King Langdharma who persecuted Buddhism and almost destroyed it completely. And so then they wanted to revive Buddhism, so another king in western Tibet sent his disciple down to India to request Atisha to come. Okay, so the incomparable Lord Atisha, unconcerned that his lifespan would be shortened by 19 years, journeyed to the land of snows. So the story behind that was, when these Tibetans invited Atisha to come, Atisha went to Bodh Gaya, and there was a statue of Tara there, and he asked Tara whether he should go to Tibet. And Tara said, yes, but your lifespan will be shortened by 19 years by going. Okay, so what this verse is referring to is how compassionate Atisha was, that unconcerned with his own lifespan being shortened, he just wanted to spread the Dharma and help the people in Tibet. Okay, and so he accepted the invitation and he went to Tibet and he taught far and wide, and he mostly taught about refuge and karma. Yeah, and people always wanted him to talk about this, that, and the other thing, but he mostly talked about refuge and karma, even though he was really skilled in, all the sutra and tantras. Sometimes he taught other topics too, but mostly that. Okay, and then also verse 96 talking about Atisha. This is definitely the power of great compassion, having sustained the embers of the doctrine. Even to this day they have not gone out. That is the enlightened activity of his compassion. Okay, so due to the power of Atisha's great compassion, he sustained the embers of Buddhism and brought them into Tibet, where they then began to blaze again. And even today, till today, they haven't gone out, despite what the communist government has tried to do. And we see that we are the beneficiaries of Atisha's going to Tibet. Okay. So then when you think of some of our teachers who come to the West, yeah, and what they give up in order to come to the West to teach us, yeah, because teaching Tibetans is much easier than teaching us. Yeah? Tibetans have so much faith, they're very respectful, they were brought up Buddhist, so they want to learn the Dharma. Yeah. Geshe Dampa Tekcho Khensa Rinpoche, when Lama Yeshe asked him to go to teach at Manjushri Institute, he said, why do you need a Geshe to go teach these people, who don't know anything about Dharma? Yeah, but you can just send like some ordinary person to teach them, leave the Geshes to teach the advanced students in the monasteries. But anyway, he went, and then apparently after some years of teaching the Westerners, he said, oh, now I understand why you sent a Geshe. Okay, so that could have many meanings to it. I think, part of it may have to do with the fact that, we ask all sorts of questions that a Tibetan would never ask. Tibetans debate like mad, but what they debate about, even though, supposedly you can ask anything, you can go anywhere, it's actually, it's circumscribed by kind of, public opinion, and you don't ask certain questions, but those are precisely the questions that we ask. Okay, and so you need somebody who's able to answer them, and who has the patience with the people who ask them. Yeah, because it's so tempting when people ask questions that you've never been asked before, just to think, these people, you know. But I had one friend, when I lived in Dharamsala, he was Tibetan, and he told me that he was translating from Tibetan into English for some Dharma students, and he said that's how he really learned the meaning of refuge, because the Westerners asked so many questions that he had never thought about, or about aspects of refuge that he had never understood. And so he found translating for them really helpful to his own practice. Okay? But, you know, you think of what Atisha gave up to go to Tibet, what our teachers give up to come and teach us, you know, and it's by the power of compassion. Yeah. I mean, the good teachers, the bad teachers come because they want money. Yeah, but we happen to have very good teachers, and so they've come, you know, really out of compassion. Yeah. And you think of it, you know, for His Holiness to come to the West, I mean, all this jet setting around the world, my body couldn't take it, and he's older than me. And yet, you know, the force of his compassion, he's here and there and back and forth across these oceans, you know, out of compassion for sentient beings. Really quite amazing. Okay. So 97. So these are continuing the stories of great practitioners. So there are many amazing stories telling of how cats and even wolves would cease hunting and so forth near the place where the great child of the conqueror, the great bodhisattva, Sri Bhadra, was engaged in the practice of compassion. Okay, so this great bodhisattva, Sri Bhadra, was one of the 16 arhats. You know, we have the 16 arhats on our altar. And so these 16 arhats are very, very special. They're all said to be alive now, still. Okay? So Sri Bhadra's father was the charioteer to King Sudano, the Buddha's father. Yeah, he was his charioteer. And he prayed that if he had a son, he would become a monk, you know, because he saw the qualities of the king's son, the Buddha. Okay, so he said, my son would become a monk. So that was Sri Bhadra. Okay, so he became a monk, he became an arhat, and apparently he meditated, whenever he meditated on compassion, all the animals, you know, from the cats to the wolves, stopped hunting when he was meditating on compassion or when he was teaching compassion. You know, that's the power of the meditation, that the whole environment was made tranquil. Okay, so Sri Bhadra is supposedly, he's said to be living on an island in the Yomura River. Anybody know what the Yomura River is? Well, he's in an island in it with 1,200 arhats. Okay? But just the power of the compassion, what it did to the environment. That's why I thought having Kala Chakra in DC was like so totally amazing, you know, to have so many people gathered in Washington, D.C. with some interest, from, you know, this much interest in bodhicitta to having actualized bodhicitta. All those people there, you know, was just amazing. Yeah. Okay, and verse 98, the protector Manjushri, Lama Tsongkhapa, because Lama Tsongkhapa is said to be an emanation of Manjushri, during the age of the final 500 years of extreme degeneration, beautified the world with his pure discipline and stainless practice. But this is said to be the latter ripening into a good result of a prayer that he made previously in the presence of Indrakutu to grasp the holy Dharma, his mind moved by great compassion. Okay, so the protector Manjushri, who is Lama Tsongkhapa, in the final 5, they have some schema whereby, every 500 years the Dharma undergoes a certain level of degeneration. So in one of these last chunks of 500 years where the world's, becoming more degenerate, you can certainly see now, becoming more degenerate. Tsongkhapa beautified the world with his pure discipline and stainless teaching and practice. So Je Rinpoche really revived Buddhism in Tibet and clarified so many misconceptions that the Tibetans had and so many wrong ways of practice and so on. And so it's said that he beautified the world with his pure discipline because he really revived the monastic tradition and strengthened the keeping of the Vinaya, and also his stainless teaching and his practice, because he practiced very diligently. He did 1 million prostrations to each of the 35 Buddhas. So 3.5 million prostrations. And when you go to the place in Tibet, Oka, where he did those, you can see the imprint of his body in the stone that he prostrated on. I was there.
100,000.
100,000, yeah.
100,000?
Oh, 100,000 for each of the 35 Buddhas, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so 3.5 million. Okay. So, but you can see the imprint of his body on the stone. And he also did, I don't know how many mandala offerings, but he did that on stone, and the forearm, his forearm became all raw from rubbing it on the stone. And you can also go there and see the stone, and you can see that in the stone there's self-arisen from the stone, there's little flowers and gems and quite beautiful things on the stone that he used for his mandala offering. Yeah. And I don't believe in these kind of things, but these I saw these, so. Okay, so this Je Rinpoche's ability, to beautify the world with pure discipline, stainless teaching and practice is due to the ripening of some karma that he created and a prayer that he made in the presence of the Buddha Indrakutu. Okay, so many eons ago there was a Buddha named Indrakutu, and Je Rinpoche, came before him, and he had a very strong intention to hold the Dharma. Instead of grasp the holy Dharma, I think it should mean hold it. In other words, you realize it and you know it, so that you pass on both the scriptural teachings, the transmitted teachings, and also the realized Dharma. Okay, so he had a very strong intention to hold the Dharma in this way, and made that intention known to the Buddha in Indrakutu, kind of like made a promise or made a pledge. And so the Buddha Indrakutu and all of his bodhisattvas around him praised this previous life of Je Rinpoche, praised his courage. Okay, and in this Buddha Indrakutu saved countless creatures. I mean, this is the kind of person that Je Rinpoche made this pledge in front of. So this Buddha saved countless creatures. He had very strong love and compassion for them, and he gave them rest and peace. Yeah, and so he had great personal integrity, and he had 5,000 myriad followers who all became arhats. Okay, so this is quite a Buddha, and in one of the previous world systems. And so Je Rinpoche, when he was a young child, he made that aspirational prayer. He had a mala with him, a rosary, and he went to that Buddha and made that aspirational prayer. And that that karma came to ripen, where he could actualize that prayer when he was born in Tibet and was able to restore the Dharma and really make the Dharma flourish again in Tibet. Okay. And again, it's because of Je Rinpoche's great kindness in doing this that, we're in his lineage, that then, he was able to pass this down to his teachers, to their teachers, his students to their students, and so on, down to our teachers. Yeah. So it comes from Je Rinpoche's compassion, and it comes from the Buddha Indrakutu's great compassion as well. Okay. Questions? Yeah.
I'm wondering about why you think Atisha lost some lifespan, because he did such great meritorious things, and the Karma teachings we hear, negative things shorten lifespan.
Yeah. So why would Atisha's life have been shorter if by going to Tibet he created so much good karma? Yeah. It could have been that, I'm just hypothesizing here, okay? It could have been that there was some strong kind of, what's the name of the karma? I can't remember. Like a sudden karma that ripens. Something that's going to interfere with the duration of your lifespan. So there might have been something like that from a previous life. And sometimes when you create a lot of merit, it makes some kind of negative karma ripen in a small way instead of in a big way. So perhaps it was something like this. I don't know, I'm just making up something. Okay? Yeah. Why? How am I supposed to know the answer to that question?
Maybe you can tell me beforehand what not to ask.
Oh, you're free to ask everything. There's nothing wrong with asking. It's just I can't answer it. It's something to do with karma, and they always say only the Buddha knows the details of how karma manifests in particular occasions. So I'm calling on that to explain why I can't answer your question.
We can illustrate that level of compassion for generations to follow.
What level of compassion?
That he made that choice out of compassion for the Tibetan people. So
Right.
That story. Maybe that's the reason.
Yes, so that there would be that story
that
to tell us.
Goes on and on and on.
I
Yeah.
thought it was the extreme change in climate.
Yeah, it could be.
In India too.
Highland Tibet, yeah. But even if you think of, the people, what they had to do to bring Buddhism to other countries, especially in China, they tell such amazing stories of the early Chinese sages who, because they had even further to go. They had to go across the Gobi Desert and across the Karakoram Mountains and into India. And so you have people like Xuanzang who did that and then just brought back, tons of scriptures. And by bringing back so many scriptures, that's what really got Buddhism, made it flourish in China. And yet you had, and there was so many great Chinese monks who went and brought back the teachings, but also so many who perished. Yeah, who tried to go, and going through the Gobi Desert and across the Karakoram Mountains, is not easy, and so many people died in their efforts to learn the Dharma and to bring it back, both to China and then also to Tibet. So, why did people do this? They didn't need to. Yeah, especially the great sages in India, they didn't need to go to other countries. There are plenty of people in India to teach. Yeah, and yet out of compassion, they went. And then you have the people from Tibet and China and also Central Asia, which used to be very much Buddhist. Those people who really yearned for the Dharma. And they didn't say, oh, it's too far to drive a half an hour across town to the Dharma Center, you know. They you know, got on their feet and they loaded up their camels and they started walking. And there were bandits and, you know, floods and all sorts of things, wild animals that they had to deal with. So, you know, you really see the strength of that spiritual yearning and wanting to know the Dharma, and the strength of their compassion, that after they went to India, they came back to their own country and brought the Dharma with them. And they went through that whole journey again. They could have stayed in India and just studied and practiced there. But no, they made that horrendous journey again, back to Tibet, back to China, back to Central Asia, and brought the Dharma with them for the benefit of the people who lived in those places. Yeah. So, you know, when you think about what these people did and how they lived and what their minds were like, it gives us really a lot of appreciation, you know, and helps us to you know, see the preciousness of the Dharma, and maybe it gives us some inspiration to make our mind more courageous and our mind stronger, so that we can become like these great beings, you know, and do the same kind of benefit. Okay, yeah.
In the earlier verse, on the first ones, you were talking about the karmic results. What was the one for ethical conduct?
Oh, having a good rebirth. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Perhaps he died earlier because it was better for the world that he died at that time rather than at a later time.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. Okay, we're going to stop now. So hopefully that gives you something to meditate on, something to think about.